Thank you, Reiko. Those here in the sanctuary and those online, Shennum, Minister of Congregational here at First Unitarian Society. I am joined on the Sam King, our worship associate. We are supported this morning by our many and staff who provide our online flowers, keep our spaces beautiful, and care for our children and youth. Gratitude to all who help our spaces, create our spaces for us to gather this morning. If you are new joining us today, then again, welcome. I hope you were able to grab an order of service on your way in, and if you are online, then the link to the order of service is in the chat or in the description of the service. This will help you follow along in our service, as well as provide events or ways for you to connect deeper with our congregation. In addition, towards the back, there are tips to help answer any questions you may have. Also, look for our yellow connection cards, either in the pews in front of you or out in the gallery. You can fill those out and get connected to our weekly, monthly, and Friday newsletters that go out with information about our community. Of course, if you have additional questions, ask anybody with an official name tag. They should be able to help you or point you in the direction to find answers. We also have someone monitoring the chat, so if you have questions there, please put them in the chat and they will be able to answer them for you. As many of you know, Southern California is experiencing deadly wildfires at this time. We are looking for sources to help raise funds for the efforts, and we'll get them out in this upcoming week's flame, as well as take an offering for them next Sunday. At this time, I want to invite us to take a moment to pause and just hold those impacted by the fires, those who have lost their lives or loved ones, and those who are battling the fires. Let us focus our love and prayers in their direction for the next minute. Thank you for your shared compassion. This morning's offering will be for the UUSC's Guest at Your Table program. Linda Harris will be sharing more time during the offering, not Santana. If you have your Guest at Your Table boxes, then be prepared to turn them in during the offering. This Sunday, we continue our theme of the practice of story. We will focus our worship time together on stories of resilience, personal and historical. As we settle into this sacred space together, I want to share our poem of the month by Robert Levatt Smith, titled Tales We Tell Ourselves. In January, when the wind is shrill, we contemplate its sad soliloquies. As bitter weather bends us to its will, street trees embroider doubtful histories. The spirit of the season faced both ways, the future as uncertain as the past. Both faces sow prevailing wisdom says, composing chronicles that will not last. We shelter in the tales we tell ourselves, truths deeply rooted in the loam of time. Our sense of narrative, if nothing else, inclines our common lives to the sublime. And even if we never write a word, our stories rescue us from the absurd. Again, welcome to worship.
I now invite you to join me in saying the words of our unison chalice lighting, printed in your order of service. We light this chalice for the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the fire of commitment. We light this symbol of our faith as we gather together.
Sing. When I don't have it in front of me, I don't know what I'm doing. We're going to greet each other now. Please take time to reach out to somebody that you haven't met yet today and make them feel welcome. And those online, introduce yourself as well. Let us gather back together.
There was a boy, a very strange, enchanted boy. They say he traveled very far, over land and sea. A little shy and sad of eye, but very wise was he. And then one magic day, he passed my way. And while we spoke of many things, fools and kings, this he said to me: the greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. Ooh, 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 ooh.
This is a story about a man with a story about stories, if you will. Once upon a time, there was a man with a story. This wasn't any old story, not one you could find on a bookshelf or heard around a campfire. This was his story and no one else's. This story was carefully crafted. It began when he was born, and this story told of his loves and his fears, his dreams realized, and his dreams yet to come. This story was complete. It told his whole life, including those bits that still existed in his imagination. In fact, this story was so complete, and he was so happy with this story that he carried it around to make sure it was safe. It was somewhat bulky and unwieldy, but he didn't mind. It was his story. The thing about his story, it was very fragile, made up of many pieces, held together by only his imagination. He was worried it might break apart at any minute. And so he grew more and more protective of his story. He held it even closer. And as he went about his life, he checked on the story to make sure it was following it, make sure he was following it correctly. He avoided adventure and unknowns because, well, they might break his story. And then one day, the inevitable happened. Without warning, his story broke. It was unforeseen, and he hadn't done anything wrong, but there it was, laying in 1,000 shattered pieces on the ground, with the sunlight glinting off the bits of the story he had so carefully protected all those years. He was heartbroken. And since his story hadn't said to put the pieces back together, he was at a loss. What now? He sat down next to the pile of pieces and cried. A while later, maybe it was minutes, maybe it was hours, a group of people came out of the nearby building and saw him sitting on the sidewalk, surrounded by a pile of broken pieces, clearly in need of help. "What happened?" a woman asked. "My story's gone. I worked so hard to build it, to protect it, to keep it from harm, and now it's gone. Gone," he wailed. "Is this the story here?" a man asked. "Yes, look at it. There's nothing left of it." "It looks like it's here, not gone," said a child. "We just have to put it back together." "Put it back together? There's no way. You don't even know what it looked like. How will you put it back together if you don't even know me?" The child was tenacious. "Don't worry. With all of us here to help, we'll put it back together in a way that you would never even expect. You never know. It might be more beautiful than before." And so they swept up the pieces of the man's story carefully and went together into the building, which they had merged. They poured him some coffee, sang a song he had never heard before, something about coming and coming again, though you've broken your vows 1,000 times. The song was soothing, the coffee was warm. He began to feel hope again that his story could be put back together. And it took a long time, maybe a couple days, maybe years even. But they got it all back together, and they added new parts. And some old parts didn't fit anymore, but that was okay. The child had been right. It was more beautiful than before. And this time, the story held together was not only held together by his imagination, but by the imagination and support of the entire community. And it wasn't nearly so fragile, and it even allowed for adventure. I hope you will allow your stories to be expanded and add some adventure to them. And if you need some help, you can just look around to each other and get some support as well. And that is our story. This is a time in our service when we say our sacred promises together. If you would please rise as you are able to share in the words of our unison covenant printed in your order of service, and then we will sing the doxology. In the doxology, the children will go out to their classes. Please say the words with me. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to speak the truth in freedom, and to help one another.
Peace, goodwill on earth be sung.
In 1960, if you wanted to make light, you used an incandescent bulb. That wasted a lot of energy. Lighting in the US used as much energy as millions of cars. Then in 1962, General Electric invented the red LED. A couple years later, the green LED came along. We were so close to being able to make screens on mobile phones, monitors that weren't huge and boxy, energy-efficient white light bulbs. We just needed to figure out how to make a blue LED. But then progress stalled. Even with thousands of researchers working on it, the science was too hard. People tried, but after 3 decades of failure, most folks gave up and assumed it was impossible. People like to think that the arc of science was continual progress, but when the going got tough, many people quickly gave up. One person, Shuji Nakamura, didn't give up. In the late 80s, Nakamura's company was struggling, so he went to the company's president and asked him to take a risk and let him stop his normal research and work on the blue LED. He knew that he couldn't do it on his own, so his first step was to move from Japan to Florida to learn how some other folks were trying to solve part of the puzzle. When he went there, his coworkers shunned him because he didn't have a PhD. They wouldn't let him use the equipment, so he had to build his own. That inspired him to prove all of them wrong. When he got back from Florida, he tried to make a blue LED using gallium. 99% of the LED researchers thought that gallium would fail. That's why he chose to research it. He wanted to make sure his research was unique, groundbreaking. He couldn't do that by following the pack. When he tried using the state-of-the-art machines, it did fail. So he built his own. The other researchers didn't know how to make their own machines, but because of the discrimination he faced in Florida, this wasn't his first time having to figure things out on his own. He worked 12-hour days, every single day with no weekends or holidays for 1.5 years. But then he made 2 breakthroughs. But despite that, the company president that was supporting his research retired, and the new president told him to stop, even though he was making progress. So Nakamura went behind his back, published the research he had already done, and kept at it. He kept ignoring the repeated orders to stop, and he trusted his own judgment. He followed his heart even when it seemed like everyone was against him, and before long, he finished and he made a blue LED. His company went from the verge of bankruptcy to making billions of dollars, mostly off of that one invention. And as thanks for all of his hard work, his company gave him a bonus of $170. The company didn't respect him, but he gained international renown along with a Nobel Prize for his work. Now he's at UC Santa Barbara, and he has his own company where he's working on things like medical applications for LEDs. Now, we don't come to church to learn about electronics, but we do come here to learn about what to do when it seems like everything is dark and you're about to fail. What to do when your coworkers are elitist and don't respect you, your boss doesn't like you, no one thinks that you can succeed. Sometimes, even when it seems like the progress through history has stopped, when it seems like you've been working on something for months or years, sacrificing nights and weekends to no avail, when you just want to do your part and make the world a better place, but everyone is against you. Sometimes you prove everyone wrong and you win.
Good morning. My name is Linda Harris, and my husband Marty and I are the UUSC local representatives for our congregation. The UUSC, or Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, is our UU Faith in Action organization. Today is our annual UUSC Membership Sunday. We will be collecting guest at your table boxes for those of you who have brought them with you, who kept them over the holidays, or checks for the totals in your boxes. And all offerings today will go to the human rights, social justice, advocacy, and relief work of the UUSC. Any donation, plus your contact information on one of the envelopes in your order of service, will give you membership to the UUSC. And you can go to their website, which is listed here in this brochure, and find out a lot more about all of the things that they do. If you donate $150 or more, either through this envelope or at the website that's listed in the brochure for donateuusc.org, by the end of January, your donation will be doubled. It'll be matched by the UU congregation at Shelter Rock. It feels really appropriate that the UUSC Membership Sunday is on a day when the sermon focuses on the stories we tell, and to learn their connections to resilience in our lives. The UUSC's work began in 1939 when Reverend Waitzel Sharp and his wife Martha, who was a social worker, decided to leave their family and home in peaceful Massachusetts and go to Europe to help those under threats from the Nazis. Today, UUSC's partners with many grassroots organizations, both nationally and internationally, whose efforts and resilience inspire us and give us hope on those days when we get up to national and world news, where hope is rather hard to find some days in these times. I invite you to stop by the UUSC table after the service to find out more about the UUSC and the work they do, and find out how you can help with this. So the offertory will be taken, and boxes and donations both accepted. Thank you.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are.
Thank you, Shannon. I want to invite you into a time of reflection and meditation. Take a few centering breaths in and out. Settle your body. Let your shoulders softly fall away from your ears. If you feel safe doing so, feel free to close your eyes. As we think about stories today, I want you to think about those stories in your life that have informed you about resilience or the ability to keep going when life was hard. It could be a story of your own, a story of a loved one, a story about a historical person, or even a story about a fictional person. Who has inspired you at times when you were struggling? What is the story you heard that lets you know you could keep going? What are the stories that rescued you from the absurd? Let these stories twirl around with you in this time. Hold on to them, and we will come back to them later in the service. For now, in the silence that holds all things, I invite us to ask for what we need and the ability to open ourselves up to receive it. During this time, if you have lost a loved one or someone close to you, we invite you to stand or raise your hand in silent witness to that loss. That the world doesn't always make space to acknowledge and hold, but is so present to us. We will come out of this silence in song with words found in your order of service. Feel free to join or just listen.
We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God.
Our reading is The Moment for Visionary Narratives by Adrienne Marie Brown. This is adapted from an article written by Adrienne Marie Brown after the 2016 election. It is unfortunately still relevant today and gives us an idea of how to use stories to help keep hope and action alive. Adrienne Marie Brown writes, "It feels like new media platforms launch every day, but are only being used to tell the same old stories, enforcing the current limits of our collective imagination. And it is clearer than ever that we are currently trapped inside the imagination of people who are not committed to a future that includes us or even happens on this planet. There's a body of people across the globe whose ancestors organized the world around a few core ideas that are incompatible with human survival on Earth, who imagined themselves as white royalty amongst black and brown masses, who bent policy, economy, and culture to realize this imagined supremacy. And now we are in it, and it is in us. Now we need to be the storytellers of the next phase of the future. And we need to concern ourselves not just with the content of our liberating imaginings, but with how we imagine it together. Octavia Butler predicted this moment in her parables, a president elected on a platform of white nationalism, misogyny, and anti-intellectualism, even down to the slogan, "Make America Great Again." Butler was a black science fiction writer, and her vision was radical. She was able to imagine the pattern of the news cycles unfurling in the future to tell us about the most likely outcomes and the new problems we would face. Visionary fiction speaks of art that is self-aware, that understands there's no such thing as neutral. Art either advances or regresses our evolution, justice, and liberation. We use the term to identify work that centers marginalized communities, understands change as a bottom-up process, challenges single hero narratives, and moves beyond the binary of dystopia or utopia. It was important for us to gather these stories from people doing the work because we believe that all organizing is science fiction, shaping the future to be a just and liberated place. We aren't the beginning of visionary fiction, and Butler isn't the only one who is writing it. The work of Samuel Delaney, Stephen Barnes, Nalo Hopkinson, Walter Mosley, Cherie Renee Thomas, Nadima Okafor, Ursula Le Guin, Tana Nariv Dew, Doris Lessig, Marge Piercy, and many others fits this category. But imagination is only the first step. We have to get our stories to the people.
I'd like to share with you now a story that I wrote for myself as a guide of how I wish to live my life. Love, listen, and learn from life with openness. Love, listen, and learn from life with openness. Open heart, open mind, open eyes, and open ears. Love, listen, and learn from life with openness. All of which is to be done with joy, laughter, song, compassion, authenticity, and appreciation. Love, listen, and learn from life with openness. Gain strength from times of suffering, and teach others through action, not thought. By doing this, you'll discover your path through following your heart. By following your heart, you will be fulfilled and happy. That happiness will make you whole and give you inner peace. Love, listen, and learn from life with openness. Love, listen, and learn from life with openness. Love, listen, and learn from life with openness.
I have to give Shannon a little bit of credit for this morning's service because we did some brainstorming in December and she helped me come together with some ideas today. And so I appreciate your collaboration as well as Sam's stories and reflections that he's added as well. So how many of us have felt like the man in our story where we held our stories and all of a sudden it unraveled or it broke and we didn't know what to do? I know I've definitely been there as a minister, as a parent, as a U.S. citizen, and as a human being. Each time I've come to a place where my story has unraveled or broken, and I couldn't hold on to what was true any longer, I encountered a new story or a new perspective that helped me build strength again. What about you? How many have had stories from others that have helped build them back up after that? Yeah. Stories are powerful. It's why they make up so much of our worship. They can be inspiring, educational, humorous, and insightful. They help us find new ways of being in the world. As I reflected on personal stories of resilience in my life this past week, I kept coming back to my parents, Jess and Judy Greenlee. They were high school sweethearts, married when they were 18 and 19 years old. And over the 50 years they were married, they went through some pretty tough times, to name just a few, and this is just a few. The loss of a child, major health concerns, job uncertainty, premature birth of a child, death of parents, loss of their retirement, and so much more. My dad battled cancer for 6 years before he died, and he met each day with a determination of getting through what the day would bring. Even on the last day he was conscious, he made an effort to get out of bed, come into the living room, watch Jeopardy, and ask for a root beer. Right? He heard that song start to play, and he's like, oh no, I need to be out there. My mom has been the same way, determined to keep going. She's currently recovering from a stroke and keeps engaging in all the activities that help her improve as much as she can. Both of them have been models of resilience in my life, that determination to just keep going no matter what, because to stop was not an option. Who did you think of when you were thinking of a personal story of resilience in your life? Was it a story of your own resilience? Was it a story of family members or loved ones, ancestors? I forgot to tell you, this service is interactive. Well, the one thing that we know about stories is that when we share them, we get to hold them more dear. We get to spread their message. So I want you to turn to each other and share your stories of personal resilience. And these are your personal ones. Again, you have permission to share what you'd want to share and what you don't share. If you don't want to speak to somebody, you can sit quietly and reflect on your own. And those online, if you would like to share in the chat, please do so. Or if you're watching service with someone, share with each other in your space. So let's take a few moments to share our stories with each other. If you haven't done so, switch to another person so they can tell their story. All right, let's come back together. You can continue sharing these personal stories during coffee hour. So how many of you were inspired by the stories you heard? Right? In our reading, Adrienne Marie Brown encouraged us to get the stories of resilience out in the open, to share them with one another, and most importantly, to make space for those stories we don't hear that have so much wisdom. Like the story Sam shared about Suji Nakamura and the blue LED light, who persisted despite all the walls put in place to deter his work. I want to tell you another story about resilience from history. It's Dolores Huerta's story. This is taken from the U.S. Department of Labor Hall of Honor induction of Dolores Huerta. Raised by a single mother in the farm worker community of Stockton, California, as a young girl, Huerta observed the inhumane conditions faced by migrant farm workers and dedicated her life to the men and women who harvest America's fields. Huerta co-founded the National Farm Workers Association with Cesar Chavez in 1962. The union later became the United Farm Workers, the oldest Latino organization to come out of the civil rights movement and the largest farm worker organization in America. Working side by side with Chavez, Dolores' accomplishments are vast. Huerta secured state-backed aid for dependent families and disability insurance for injured California farm workers. She directed a national grape boycott to protest the dangers of pesticides on grape pickers, which resulted in the entire California table grape industry changing its practices. And she negotiated the first ever collective bargaining agreement with an agricultural business to secure better wages and working conditions for farm workers. Huerta was an outspoken advocate for world peace, the rights of immigrants, women, minorities, at-risk youth, and LGBT Americans. During her decades of leadership, Huerta endured beatings, death threats, and arrest for leading nonviolent protest to give a voice to the voiceless. The unflappable leader had her bones, but never her spirit, broken in the struggle. In 2012, President Obama awarded Huerta the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor, for her lifetime of advocacy on behalf of the undeserved. In addition, Huerta received the Eleanor Roosevelt Human Rights Award in 1998, and as of 2015, I'm not sure if this is still the case, she was a board member of the Feminist Majority Foundation, the Secretary-Treasurer Emeritus of the United Farm Workers of America, and the president of the Dolores Huerta Foundation. Wow, what a life, right? This is a woman who oftentimes did not take credit for the work that she did. And not only did she do all this advocacy work, she did it while raising 11 children as a single mother. In reading about her, I learned the origin of the chant. I have said so many times, especially up in Washington State where I served before, and it was a huge agricultural area, and oftentimes we would be out doing immigrant right work and agricultural workers' work. And the phrase, si se puede. Oftentimes it's credited to Cesar Chavez, but here in an NPR interview, she tells the story of its origin and how she was the person that actually brought it to the movement. She says, "We were in Arizona. We were organizing people in the community to come to support us. They had passed a law in Arizona that if you said boycott, you could go to prison for 6 months. And if you said strike, you could go to prison. So we were trying to organize against that law, and I was speaking in a group of professionals in Arizona to see if they could support us. And they said, oh, here in Arizona, you can't do that. In Arizona, no se puede. No, you can't. And I said, no, in Arizona, sí se puede. And I went back to our meeting that we had every night there, and I gave that report to everybody. And when I said, "Si se puede," everybody started shouting it, "Si se puede, si se puede." And that became the slogan of our campaign in Arizona, and now is the slogan for immigrant rights movement that you know on posters. We can do it. I can do it. Si se puede. I love the imagination of this story. When walls are being put up, you can't say boycott, you can't say strike, and the answer is, si se puede. Yes, we can. These are the stories we need at the forefront right now, the ones that use that visionary narrative to redefine a world that seems to be getting smaller, scarier, and centered in fear. Instead of being stopped in our movement, we need to find the paths that open up if only we used our imagination and search for them. If you haven't already, I want you to think about a resilient story from history. Who has inspired you through their work or life? And again, I'm going to invite you to turn to one another and share your stories of resilience from history. Online, share with each other through chat or with the person with you. And if you want to sit quietly, you still are welcome to do that. Please share. I invite you to have the other person share if they haven't yet. All right, take a minute to wrap up your storytelling. And remember, we have coffee hour after this where you can share more. How many of you heard a story you hadn't heard before? Or remembered a story that you had known but didn't have in your mind? Yeah. Again, stories are powerful. They can be found in our libraries, in our films, in our conversations, and in our worship. They are everywhere around us. We just have to take the time to remember them or search them out. We definitely need to share them, because that is what will get us through difficult times, challenging times, even when our own stories seem to be unraveling or broken, or even when the stories around us, maybe of our nation, seem to be unraveling or broken. Let us remember the stories shared here today and can continue to read, to learn, to share, and to make room for all the stories. All the stories. May it be so. Please rise in body or spirit to join in our closing hymn that Shennum will lead us in.
We will sing hymn 1051. You should be familiar with the song by now. Delighted to sing it with all of you. Just a word of note, there are a few repeats in this song, so you're going to be repeating for each child that's born. And then when we get to page 2, when it ends at Makers of Peace and Wisdom of Ages, you want to turn back to page 1. I know. And start again with We Are Our Grandmother's Prayers, and then you can sing it all the way through. And if you get lost, we know you're with us in spirit, and let us move forward.
We are our grandma. Hello. I'm Liz Strand, a member of the Board of Trustees here at UUSF. And this is Belle. And as worship ends, we invite you to find other ways to connect and serve and live your values this upcoming week. There are 3 items I'd like to highlight from the order of service today. First one is coming up on Saturday, coming up January 18th at 10 a.m. It is Unpacking Racism. Join us for a powerful workshop and discussion. It's at 10 a.m. The second one is a Cape Town banquet experience, women's rights group fundraiser. Sign up today after church. It's also on January 18th at 6:30 p.m. And the menu includes a variety of African-inspired dishes such as vegan Imfino patties, Nigerian kebabs, and Egyptian koshery, along with fried rice balls filled with shrimp. That's a fundraiser, and the fee is $50 per person. The third one is the end-of-life series called Wills and Trusts, and that's next Sunday after the service at 1 p.m. in the TSK room. Come and join Julia Wald and Ben Gale as they discuss the importance of creating and updating wills and trusts. Refreshments will be offered. And I look forward to seeing you all after the service at the social hour outdoors in our courtyard. Hope to see you there. Thank you.
Now we extinguish the chalice, but carry the light, the warmth, and the commitment to live our shared values in the world with us until we gather again. Please rise in body or spirit. If you feel like you would like to hold on to the hand of the person next to you, feel free to do so. If you want to just put your arms out, you can do that as well. May this story shared here in this sacred space remain with us to provide us strength and hope. And when these stories fade, may we find new ones to help us continue on our way. Love be with you today and this rest of this week. Amen.